Hey everyone, this is Fugu here from CRE8RDAO, and I'm here with both Ivan and Shamir from Fluidity. Fluidity is an up-and-coming protocol which is superpowering cryptocurrencies so that they reward you when you use them. How's it going, guys?
Hey Fugu, everything's all right. Thanks for asking.
Excited to learn about Fluidity and everything that you guys are up to. There's a lot of hype about this project, so I am looking forward to speaking to you guys today. So, let's just start off simply. Who are you guys personally? Who is Ivan and who is Shamir?
Ivan, you could start.
For sure. So my name is Ivan Seara Nunes. I'm from Brazil. I've been all around the world now. Lived a while in the UAE, now in Australia, and I've been involved in crypto for quite a while. Got interested a little bit early. I had this little club, or this non-for-profit, because we didn't want to be bombarded by the university in the University of Adelaide, called the Adelaide Blockchain. So this is in Adelaide, South Australia. And that gained quite a bit of traction. That was really nice. It was like an educational basis. We would invite the protocols that were relevant at the time. Let's just say OneChain, ARC, all those ancient crypto names that you might not hear about right now. And that was a really fun time. There was lots of like Lightning Network, Bitcoin, and all this type of stuff. I'm personally in engineering, mechatronics engineering, computer science undergrad. And I have had experience in the past working in engineering, internships, Infosys, blah, blah, blah. Most recently, I worked at Mycelium's Chainlink Oracle Reputation, which eventually became Reputation DAO. And I've been involved working with Fluidity together with Shamir, Alex, our CTO, and a few other people who are my close friends. And I've known them because of lots of like the Adelaide blockchain stuff that happened a while ago. And I've been around for about a year, close to a year working in Fluidity now, and it's been a pleasure. It's been really nice to see the space as well as the protocol itself evolve.
Awesome. What's your role at Fluidity?
I'm the head of product of Fluidity.
Great. And Shamir?
Cool. Hi, I'm Shamir. I'm one of the co-founders with Alex. And my background actually is a bit unconventional. It's actually in game design. And it wasn't nothing professional, but rather when I was much younger, starting from the age of 10, I used to make games for Android and then eventually even Windows Phone. So it's been a while. And a lot of actually Fluidity's mechanics and, some of the design choices that we made come from, some of the theoretical elements of games, and you'll learn a lot more about it as we progress within this podcast. So I've met Ivan a couple years ago at one of the Adelaide blockchain events, and since then we've shared the mutual interest of blockchain, and it's really exciting having him on Fluidity and working on this.
Nice. So you mentioned you also have a co-founder, Alex. How many people are on the team total?
We're constantly changing size, but it's roughly between 10 to 12 people now. Most of them, starting to go towards full time.
How many of them are devs?
I would say more than 80% of us would be devs. So we do have a fair bit of devs in the team.
Nice. How did you guys actually end up getting together and joining forces to become Fluidity?
So Fluidity actually started off as an idea that I had for a class that I had to take as part of my degree. And the class was basically have to come up with a startup over the course of a semester. And so, I kind of wanted to, do something in the blockchain space. And so I had Fluidity as an idea as part of this class, and then it was the timing was right. As part of this like one semester, I was able to get a grant from Compound for Fluidity, so it really started taking off. And prior to that, we've been working with like a few of the other classmates on blockchain stuff. So I kind of started like after the bear market, 2018-19, I kind of started like getting people, especially the devs at the university, promoting blockchain, and it's just building a small community around it, so we could build something really interesting. Yeah, so we all met at university somewhere or another, and just eventually our paths crossed again and things worked out.
Are you guys anon or you're doxxed?
Yeah, we're doxxed.
100% docs. That's right.
Yeah, find us on LinkedIn. And me personally, if you search my name, there'll be a lot that shows up. But yeah, I think we have, we're here for the long term. And so we have, nothing to hide. And we're very public about it as well.
Well, now that you said the university story, it's at least showing that you're at least university age or older. You're not like the Rari Capital team, some 15-year-olds or 12-year-olds or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we're still pretty young as a team, relatively as well. So I reckon we have a bit of, the best of the both worlds, the passion and just the drive that young people do, but also a little bit of the maturity now, being in university and graduating for some of us.
Awesome. So you actually have some people on the team that are in university right now as
Oh yeah,
part of different like business courses and
I guess most of our devs are actually still at university, but they've been programming since they were young, in their school days, right? So they have a lot of programming experience, and university is just something they kind of had to do, I guess, part of things you have to do. So that was kind of why the team was created in the first place, is that a lot of the devs, they're extremely talented, and they could build things like this with ease, and so we just needed to promote it, and yeah.
But if you're a dev and you start building an awesome project in the crypto space, but you're still in uni and they're not teaching you, I assume they're not teaching you stuff like Solidity yet. Don't you say to yourself, this is getting boring. Like I just want to get out of here and build.
Yeah, and that's the attitude most of our devs have. So it's been interesting because a lot of the devs that we do have, they are good enough to be, employed by Google or the tier 1 technology firms, and some of their friends that went the corporate route have been given internships and accepted jobs at Google, and all. And I think it's just it was a good fit for them. And university is just, I think, maybe just something that they want to do as part of life, that you feel accomplished. But yeah, I mean, they're really talented, so they can balance the best of both worlds.
And simultaneously, the fact that everyone really met because of university really serves as that hub where a lot of people can come together. And I'm not necessarily saying that university is only that type of hub, but because we are in one of this big city but still smaller cities in Australia, it does sort of help to gather those interests. And yeah, a lot of our devs, they have an immense amount of talent, so much so that they have actually rejected offers from these big corporate companies, and so because they feel passionate about the space that they're working in right now. So it's quite interesting.
That's what's happening. Everyone's coming to crypto.
Yeah, and the fact that I think that culture is extremely important as well. So particularly after working in this asynchronous, decentralized space, now a lot of the devs that we actually have, not a lot actually, a few of the devs, including our biz dev Yoel, and our researcher or head of strategy, as we say, Eric, they're actually located in Europe. And the way that we met these wonderful people is quite interesting. It's just I was friends with Yoel, and the TLDRs that we met because of Chainlink, right? And Eric is friends with Alex, and they met back in the Antshare days, the eventual Neo coin days. And it's so interesting how everyone's paths just crossed together, and eventually we ended up working in this incredible protocol that's coming together really nicely.
Yes, Neo. Let's not talk about that. We'll save that for the off the record discussion. Okay, so you guys gathered this team of devs and other people in the crypto space that are motivated, young, ready to roll, and you make a project. You call it Fluidity. Why is it called that?
It's actually really interesting. So I guess a lot of where fluidity came from was the idea that money, has no incentive for people to spend it. So I connotated, that wait a second, it seems like money is frozen, because right now everybody just wants to hold on to it because of the incentive structures in place. And so fluidity, the name itself, kind of signifies the fact that we're essentially allowing money to become in more of a fluid or liquid form, because we're incentivizing, I guess, the utility and the velocity of money. So the idea is that a fluid asset is an asset that is more liquid, in that sense that it gets spent or is always perpetually moving across the economy.
Ah, I see. Okay, this is getting interesting. I guess we'll talk about that a bit more when we dive deeper into the project and how it works. But how are you guys funded? Are you grassroots? Do you have VCs, investors, stuff like that?
Yeah, we started off grassroots. Everybody was interested in the project, and wanted to see where it would go. As I mentioned earlier, I kind of started it just by myself. I was working on it, and was able to get a compound grant, and just then it kind of just all started falling in place. About a year ago, I think we raised our pre-seed seed round, and this gave us enough of a cushion and runway to really start making things serious. And yeah, we're in the process of raising another round now, so we do have a little bit of capital. Nothing ridiculous, but it's enough for us to keep this going.
Any names you can reveal? People that are known to the community?
Yeah, of course. So our in our pre-seed round, seed round, we had Multicoin as our lead investor. We also have Solana, Circle, Lemnis Cap, and a few of the more popular angels as well, like DCF God, Grub Capital, even Zach. He was a hard one to get because of his high level of credibility, but we also have him as an angel at Fluidity.
Like Zach XBT?
Yeah, Zach XBT, believe it or not.
I didn't know he was an angel.
Yeah. We haven't announced the round yet, but we're in the process of doing it. So we're just building, I guess. But yeah.
Nice. That's cool. I like Zach. And you mentioned also Solana. Like, what's your connection to the Solana ecosystem? And from what I understand, you guys were involved in the Solana Ignite hackathon. What was that all about?
Yeah, so our relationship in to Solana started way back, when we actually got a grant from Solana. And the grant was an interesting process because we applied for the hackathon, like this is 4 hackathons back, and they reached out to us and they said, hey, like this is really interesting, let's have a conversation about it. And we talked about it, and we were discussing that maybe Fluidity needs a bit more research, and we might be better off just spending more time just building the protocol than getting something in for that hackathon. And so we discussed options, and they said, all right, a grant makes sense. And Solana was really fast with grants. Within the next day or within the same day they approved it. And so we kind of got into Solana back with that. And then I guess the next hackathon after that, we actually submitted Fluidity as one of the options, and we did win like 5th place in the DeFi track. And yeah, I mean, since then Solana has been been extremely helpful. We they also joined in as the seed round investors as well. So yeah, that's kind of how the relationship was built with Solana.
All right. Well, now I think is the time to talk about Fluidity itself. What do you guys do in a nutshell, and how does it work?
Cool. I'll describe it, and then Yvonne could even go into more of the details. So essentially, the nutshell or the problem is that we call it the utility problem. And the idea is that right now in crypto, the incentive structures are designed for people to hold cryptocurrencies, in the sense that if you deposit money in money markets, etc., or stake capital, you have to hold on to it for you to earn any sort of yield. This is great, but in 2 situations, we think this kind of starts falling apart. The first situation being that, what if you're living paycheck to paycheck, and you just can't afford to keep a lot of capital locked up or idle? So you can't really get exposure to yield in the way it's currently designed. And secondly, this creates a lot of incentive toward just holding on to money, i.e. speculation, hoarding, and really doesn't promote the utility of crypto assets. So the idea was, what if we could now create a primitive that essentially allows, the promotion of utility of crypto assets by creating incentives for people to actually go ahead and spend cryptocurrencies. That's basically the idea in a nutshell. And that's kind of how Fluidity is looking at solving the problem by rewarding yield to people when they actually do transactions instead of holding on to crypto.
Yeah, and I can certainly jump in as well and talk, I guess, a little bit about how that could work, or what the type of actions or use cases that a brief overview, I guess. So, every transaction or every on-chain interaction is qualified for those rewards, the yield to be rewarded. And the way that it works, as Shamir said, it's you'd get your base asset, let's just say USDC, and you'll be able to wrap that and be able to mint a fluid asset out of it. And as a result, you have this sort of a backed one-to-one asset that you're able to mint and wrap and wrap essentially. So you can generate FUSDC, which is a fluid USDC, and convert that back to a USDC at any point in time. However, by transacting the fluid version of the token, you are actually opening up those options for the rewards for the users that are actually using it. So let's just say performing a swap on Uniswap or SushiSwap. Sending or receiving crypto, really. And when I say sending or receiving, because unlike regular cashback mechanics, or those payback cards that you're able to use, one of the really cool things that comes out of Fluidity is that we're incentivizing the adoption of crypto, as well as users to be able to receive and send those fluid assets. So usually you'd pay the person that's, let's say you go to the supermarket, you make a transaction, you buy something, you get a rewards card, you're able to, the person that is performing the transaction gets rewarded. However, there is no sort of incentive for the let's say SME that's allowing that transaction to take place. Or like, why would someone utilize USDC over the regular dollar in the first world country, let's just say? So in that manner, we have this split of the win. So let's just say someone wins $100 by transacting fluid assets, by sending it to someone. The sender, because they're initiating the transaction and are paying the fees, they would obtain, let's just say, 80 of those $100. And the receiver, even though they're just receiving that fluid version of the USDC, that crypto, they're also part of the winning batch, and they get, let's say, $20 out of that $100 rewards, which is really interesting, and actually increases the promotion of the protocol itself, as well as increases the promotion of the ecosystem itself, because it promotes people to actually use their assets and accept crypto, right? Apart from that, you'd have purchasing NFTs, using your favorite DEX, any form and all forms of on-chain value transfer using fluid assets actually gets rewarded. So that's actually extremely interesting. And we have a few cool economic models that actually allow this to happen, but we can get a little bit into those at a later time in the interview.
All right, I got one question and two hypothetical situations for you guys. The question is, well, one, what blockchain are you guys going to be based on, or is it a multi-chain project?
It's a multi-chain project. So initially, when we do release, we're going to be releasing on Ethereum with a follow-up release on Solana not long after. And the reason for that is because we want to test our systems to make sure that everything is working fine and everyone is able to participate in a nice functioning system. So a lot of we're going to have a minting limit, let's just say, and all those things, but all of these are protective measures in order to make sure that the protocol is functioning as intended. So we're going to be releasing in these two chains to begin with, and eventually rolling out to other chains. Like, for instance, we got a grant from Polygon. Obviously, we're going to be releasing on Polygon, some other EVM chains, focusing a little bit on layer 2 afterwards, with things such as Arbitrum on the way, Arbitrum TM, soon TM. And we certainly are aiming to make sure that Fluidity is established on any chain. So it's going to be chain agnostic in that aspect, and we want to try and establish what we're going to be calling the incentive layer, where it almost becomes its own primitive, essentially, where users are rewarded for actually interacting and transacting and using these crypto assets within the blockchain and exploring the different options and the different protocols for those chains, which is extremely exciting, because it just means that protocols with unique value propositions are able to really shine. So it's really cool.
All right. So the two situations I had in mind, and I was curious about how you're going to address them, is one, if you're incentivizing people making transactions or doing certain on-chain activities, how are you going to prevent the inevitable when people make bots that are just going to do 1 million microtransaction or just spam the chain with different stuff to try and game the system?
That's an extremely interesting question, and that's one of the things that we were originally working for the sustainable and fair economic models for Fluidity to work. So the three ones that we have is we have the optimistic solution, the transfer reward function, and the elastic sigmoid curve. So I'll quickly go over the transfer reward function, and then I'll answer your question with the optimistic solution. So the way that the transfer reward function is, it's a self-sustaining reward function that essentially pays out it pays out the consistent yield based upon variables, and as well as things like on the blockchain, such as the gas fee that the user is consuming, the fluid assets, the velocity of the fluid assets, the TVL, the annual percentages, or just the yield itself, as well as other parameters. And based upon such as how much fluid assets are staked and the actual transactions of fluid assets per day, etc. And it spits out this random number, or this variable number that is multiplied or actually used in the function in order to reward the user every single time. So every single time that someone makes those on-chain transactions, they're actually random, and they, it could be any at any point in time, at any transaction, you could win a few amount of money to a large amount of money. So it could be from a few cents to up to millions of dollars, depending on those parameters. And the transfer reward function is what actually determines that output, the actual output of the function as a result, the yield essentially, right? And for your question about, what if you just make lots of small transactions? What if you just have bots, sort of spamming the service? Or even another question is, how do you prevent people from just cyclically trying to game the system? And let's just say you and I, Fugu, we say, hey, I have some FUSDC and I'm going to be sending it to you, Ivan, and you send it back to me, and vice versa. Well, in order to prevent the spam attacks and ensuring that the protocol pays out all the gathered yield from the underlying assets, attackers will always lose more money than they can win with the fees. So essentially, over time, someone that's trying to attack the network will actually spend more on fees than they could potentially win. So even though they could, let's just say, win $1 million by performing those, microtransactions or those cyclic transactions, they're probably going to be spending $1,500,000 in transaction fees, which makes the actual attack itself, redundant. And actually, it doesn't make sense to actually attack the network. And maybe Shamir has some points to add to this as well.
Yeah, I mean, a good way of thinking about it is that essentially what we built is a difficulty readjustment algorithm. And as the amount of users that are using fluid assets in real time changes, it becomes either more difficult or easier to win the prize. And so statistically, what happens is that if you're an attacker, it will always be more gas expensive for you to win yield than you would be able to generate. So 1,000 transactions may cost you $5,000, but it will always guarantee that you'll lose money. In the sense, you'll only win, let's say, 3,000. And that's how we prevent attacks. Because the thinking here is that if you're a genuine user that was gonna pay those gas fees by swapping assets, it doesn't matter if Fluidity existed or not, you would still do it. So the idea here is that if you use a fluid asset instead, you are now earning something. And so just using that as like the base level assumption, we can ensure that attackers will always lose money. Did that make sense?
All right, you guys have thought this one through. I'm happy you have.
Yeah, we've been thinking about it quite a fair bit. Yeah.
It's certainly a mechanism that rewards users for doing what they already do. So that's really the target demographic and audience. It's people that were already going to be making that swap, people that are already going to be exploring the different on-chain ecosystems, people that are already going to be receiving or sending that money or that asset, really. With fluid assets, you just have that extra incentive that is layered on top of the existing use case that the user was going to be doing in the first place.
And my second situation I wanted to ask about is that right now the situation is, like you guys said, the assets just sit on the blockchain and are barely moved. If we can imagine a future where Fluidity gets, mass adoption, and assets are moving all the time, you're going to end up with a lot of transactions on chain. Do you think this is going to test the current blockchain to the limit, or the current blockchain technologies to their limits, create high gas fees, and we'll have to maybe accelerate scaling or things like that? Have you thought about what the implications would be if Fluidity really takes off?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty interesting scenario, and that's why we will be launching on multiple chains. So may the best chain win. Ideally, we do want a situation where people use fluid assets as the base form of value transfer. I personally don't think it will be so many transactions because you still have to have a genuine interest in originating that transaction, because if your only interest is to like try to win money from using fluid assets, you will statistically lose money by doing so. So you have to have some sort of, I guess, purpose in that transaction, like you would right now. Fluidity works really well on Solana and other low gas fee chains as well. But in terms of that gas fee rule that we enforce, even on low gas fee chains, it works, but with a caveat. So on low gas fee chains, we also consider additional fees that users pay. So for example, let's say you trade on, an AMM or a stable swap, and you pay 10 basis points in fees. We consider that fee as the gas fee. So let's say you trade 1,000 Fluid USDC and you pay $1 in fees to the LPs. We actually substitute your gas fee as that fee you've paid. So you kind of get those same probability as Ethereum without, with the very low gas fee. So the idea is to promote those exotic and useful use cases that are revenue generating for a blockchain protocol on those low gas fee chains.
All right, you've thought that one through too. All right, nice. I can't stump you guys. What are the Fluidity Wars?
Oh, okay. This is a good one.
Oh, Shamir, yeah, go for it.
Everybody probably that's listening to is maybe familiar with Curve Wars, and Curve Wars is probably one of those things in crypto that is very fascinating, has a lot of implications, and everybody wants a piece of. So I guess ever since the beginning of time, there's always been demand for user liquidity, user attention, user order flow. And protocols have figured out that okay, through Curve we can get a lot of liquidity because we can control the emissions, and hence where liquidity providers will provide liquidity. And this has been really useful for a lot of stable coins because if they win the highest amount of votes, they get a massive inflow of liquidity, and this helps them grow. But even Curve is limited in the features it can provide, in our opinion, because liquidity is great and all, but the implication of Curve Wars is very limited to the few stable coins that are participating in the Curve Wars. It necessarily doesn't affect the trading volumes on Uniswap, and it definitely doesn't affect NFT trading volumes or games in the space. So Fluidity is really fascinating because if you think about it, Fluidity essentially can change how probabilities behave between different protocols or how the Fluidity governance token is emitted. So we came up with a new token distribution mechanism, which we call utility mining. And the idea is that instead of distributing tokens to liquidity providers, we distribute tokens to the actual users of fluid assets, and allow protocols to participate in that. So imagine a scenario like this: you have two dexes, let's just say Uniswap and SushiSwap, and we or our governance decides that hey, every trade that goes on SushiSwap through a fluid asset has a bonus probability of winning $1 million. Let's say a double or triple probability. If I'm a rational user, I'm thinking, okay, I get almost the same expected outcome if I trade my, Fluid USDC for ETH on Uniswap and SushiSwap, but I have a triple chance of winning $1 million. And why wouldn't I use SushiSwap? So the idea essentially is that through governance, protocols can essentially make themselves more competitive to users themselves. And so this extrapolates to the, shortest path algorithms that, aggregators use. And the idea is that if we tell aggregators, hey, if you route your orders through SushiSwap instead of Uniswap, there's a triple chance of winning $1 million. Let's just say that. And aggregators accounting, okay, the expected value is higher through SushiSwap. So I'm going to reroute orders through SushiSwap, even though liquidity might be slightly better on Uniswap. So this is what we call the Fluidity Wars, because now there's a war for that user order flow, which is dictated by where the rewards are going when people use their fluid assets. And given enough users and liquidity and just yield that's paid out, this could have significant implications, because not only do users now decide, okay, I won't use DEX A versus DEX B, but this could have effects on NFT marketplaces. They might say, why would I sell my NFT on marketplace A, where if I could sell it on marketplace B, I have a double chance of winning a prize when I do make that sale. So things like that. And we think that for the very first time, we've created a primitive that allows protocols to compete for user attention, but also user order flow. And that competition essentially is the Fluidity Wars.
Fugu, I have a great quote as well that it certainly comes in handy here. It's something that Shamir and we actually even wrote in one of our pitch decks, which is Curve Wars focuses on where liquidity moves in the DeFi space, whereas Fluidity is about where users. So Curve Wars focuses on where liquidity moves around in this DeFi space, whereas Fluidity is about where users move in the space. And luckily for us, users have a direct positive correlation with liquidity and its flow. So that's a pretty nice little excerpt from one of our slides that I just wanted to share for the presentation.
Amazing. About the protocol revenue, how is this whole ecosystem going to generate revenue for Fluidity?
So the way we are thinking about revenue and earning money is that, there would be potentially bribes that are paid out to the Fluidity governance token holders to vote in, the most favorable outcome of the briber. So right now, Curve token holders through COMEX have received roughly over $400 million in bribes, something like that. And the idea here is that that's just for liquidity, right? What if, the outcome of the Fluidity Wars is an existential threat to, the dominance of the current, leading protocols, right? That basically face no competition. Potentially these bribes, because they have an outcome on revenue and, user control, could be much more significant and much more, I guess, yield bearing than, the Curve bribes are. The second thing that we're thinking about is that because we've created a new token distribution model, and we can work with protocols to help them distribute tokens in a more fair and wider manner and charge a very small fee for doing so. But because we're the only ones that could practically do it, we essentially would face virtually no competition. So the way utility mining works with our partner protocols is that when you use a fluid asset on, let's say, a decentralized exchange that's working with us, like Dodo, for example, what will happen is that every time you trade a fluid asset, you actually get a bonus probability of winning a prize in native tokens. So let's say I make a swap of 100 fluid USDC for ETH on Dodo, and I win a prize. Not only do I get the base yield, let's say I win $10, but I also get, let's say, 5 Dodo tokens. So essentially Dodo is now more competitive because they're offering subsidized yield, in a sense, to user order flow. So again, going back to the analogy of aggregators deciding best routes, they're also considering this. So now they're able to, say, all right, if I'm a user, I'm thinking, why would I trade on Uniswap when if I trade on Dodo, I get this bonus yield? So I'm just going to trade on Dodo instead. It's basically the same idea with how liquidity miners are thinking about where to provide liquidity. But I think secondly, the most important thing here is that now as a user of Dodo, I'm getting tokens. So it's very similar to the idea of the mechanical Turk that exists with Coinbase Earn or Rabbit Hole, where you have to do things and learn about protocols to earn tokens. But we've done that now in a general purpose way, where if I just use Dodo, I get their token. So I get ownership as a user. So we're realigning the way protocols might be thinking about distributing tokens, because it's not just the LPs that most of the times are mercenary capital or don't even have to use the protocol or learn about it. It's the actual users that can now be distributed tokens. So our thesis is that this ownership is way more fair, but it's also competitive because it allows protocols to essentially compete on price, which is something they couldn't do before.
This could also change the airdrop game completely, right?
Well, exactly right. If protocols are looking at a fair way of distributing tokens, they could use something like this and essentially, redirect user order flow and where users use protocols to themselves, right? And hopefully they get much higher or stickier users because users learn and use the protocol and might think, hey, this is really cool. I might just keep using it because I love the experience because I actually got to use it.
I wanted to talk also about the fluid assets. If we can go just deeper into that for a moment. How does this whole fluid asset thing work? How do I get some? What are the mechanics behind it and all that?
So the way that a fluid asset works is, what a fluid asset is essentially a base wrapped asset. So you can have, let's just say, the chain link token, the wrap BTC, token itself. But starting off in the beginning, we're going to be focusing particularly on stable coins. So USDC, USDT, Frax, FEI, UXD, USDH, because Solana as well, DAI, TUSD, USDT, etc. So these tokens, they can become fluid assets, and by doing so, we're essentially giving the user an option and depositing that base token that the user minted the fluid asset from in a yield generating protocol. So let's just say Aave or Compound or Solan, and there is yield that's being generated from those base assets that have been deposited. But instead of that yield being given back to the user directly, it's being deposited into a reward pool. And every time that a user transacts with their fluid assets on any on-chain transaction or any on-chain interaction with that fluid asset, they have that chance, which is dictated by the TRF, which is a transfer reward function that I spoke about earlier. And some of the reward based upon the TRF is obtained from the reward pool. So, it could be from a few cents to millions of dollars. It's based upon many variables. But what's very interesting is that 40% of every fluid, there's a 42% chance that when you transact with a fluid asset, you win something. And that something can range from a wide variety of tiers. But it's just interesting how the probabilities actually turn out in the end.
How am I actually getting a fluid asset? Do I go over to your website and I deposit and I wrap it?
In the future, the way that you get a fluid asset can literally be from a DEX, from a Uniswap, swap, from any way that you'd get a regular token. However, if you'd like to mint a fluid asset, it's exactly that's exactly the case. So you just go to our website or a web app, and you would just mint fluid asset from your base asset. So it essentially behaves very similar to a regular swap or a regular wrapping of any on-chain asset. And it's one button and bang, you have a fluid asset. And now you can participate in the fluid ecosystem.
And to make sure I understand this correctly, the underlying or your original asset is being held in a vault on something like an Aave or a Compound?
That's absolutely right. And you're able to unwrap your asset and obtain your base asset at any point in time through the smart contract. So it's not like we are able to prevent you from doing that. It's essentially like you're depositing that asset in a money market, but that yield is being generated and deposited on the reward pool rather than being deposited directly towards you.
Got it. Okay, so I get these fluid assets, which are these supercharged crypto assets that reward me as I'm transacting with them or doing different on-chain activities. But where do these rewards actually come from?
Yeah, they come from this reward pool, right? So there's this yield that's being generated from the base assets that's deposited in these money markets, such as like Aave pools and Compound pools, Solan, etc. And that yield is being deposited on this reward pool, right? And this reward pool is then used to reward the users that are transacting and these fluid assets on chain and performing on chain transactions with fluid assets. And the way that the actual numerical value or the actual reward is determined is through the transfer reward function, which, as I said earlier, it's a self-sustaining reward function that pays out consistent yield based upon a variety of variables, such as the number of transactions that happen per day, the TVL, the percentage yield that's being generated from the deposited assets, the fee, the variable fee that the user is paying on that transaction. So, for instance, as Shamir mentioned earlier, if you're transacting on Solana as a base send transaction, or actually using a protocol that has another fee that's put on top, or if you're so we call those low fee blockchains versus the high fee blockchains. So that's how the reward is actually generated and calculated and distributed to the users that use the Fluid assets.
The rewards are going to be in the underlying. So if you have the Fluidity USDC, you're going to be getting rewards in USDC. If you have the Fluidity ETH, you're going to get.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, no, that's you guessed it right. So if you were transacting in Fluid USDC, the reward that you'll be getting, whenever you check later on your wallet, you'll be getting, oh, look, I got some Fluid USDC or some USDC on my wallet just for transacting or just for performing that swap, right? So you might be sending some money to pay back for that beer that you had yesterday for lunch with someone, and after sending $10 in Fluid USDC, you might just realize that you've gained $5, for performing that transaction, or and your friend might have gotten $2 for receiving that money that you sent them. So it's very interesting. And obviously, on top of that, there's other reward mechanisms that don't on play here, much like Shamir was talking about, which is the utility mining and these Fluidity War components and elements of it, where you might actually be swapping your Fluid asset on a protocol that's participating in this Fluidity Wars. And not only do you get that reward, which is the base reward, which is, let's just say 5 Fluid USDCs on top of the Fluid USDC swap that you just made, but maybe this protocol is running they're running a campaign where every time that you transact something, they're running a utility mining campaign, or utility mining program, as we call them. And every time that you perform a swap on a specific asset at a specific time, there's a chance that you can actually win their governance token as well. And in the future, there will actually be a chance of you winning Fluidity governance token just for transacting on the participating protocols that are participating in the Fluidity Wars, much like you'd sort of expect from a curve wars type of scenario. So it's rewards on top of rewards on top of rewards. So there's almost like there's 3 layers of incentives for users and protocols to participate in this ecosystem.
Very cool. So I guess the way I picture it is, let's say you were in the ETH pool on Curve in the early days, and you had like multiple layers of yield. You got the yield from the swaps, which was in the underlying, which is like you mentioned originally. And then on top of that, the protocol can put rewards, so that gave you LIDA rewards. And then you got the Curve governance token on top of that. So you guys kind of are like that, but incentivizing, instead of just being an LP, incentivizing being an actual user.
Yeah, that's right.
Very cool. I'm intrigued by this mention of the Fluid token, and we will talk about that in a second as well. But going back to the thing you were mentioning also about the lottery system, can you briefly just say again how this lottery thing works, and how do you make sure that the winners of the draw are done fairly and that it's not tampered with?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, Shamir, you can answer that one. That's a very interesting question.
Yeah, no, that's definitely an interesting question. So there's 2 parts for it. The first part is, how do we pick the winners? And then the second part is exactly how do we ensure transparency? I'll go in the first part. Yvonne might be better off explaining the second part. But essentially what happens is that every time you do a transaction, the TRF is basically, input with the details like TVL, the current APY, how much we're earning, your gas fees, etc. And it generates like a table that dictates the current, probabilities and those associated payouts. And people can look into our economics white paper. It's on our website on what exactly this looks like in practice. But the idea is you'll have things like, okay, this transaction has a 42% chance of winning 18 cents, a 12% chance of winning $1, so on, a 0.001% chance of winning $1 million. And so the way, you get in the higher tiers is essentially it's very similar to us picking balls, and the number of matches you get on those balls are how many tiers you've won or which tier you fall into. So imagine, we pick 6 balls, and then and each ball has a number, let's say 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21, and you essentially we pick for you, I guess, using some sort of random number generator, and the amount of matches you get essentially is the tier you get. So if you get 3 matches, you get into the tier 3 prize, which might be $100, and so on. And the probabilities of getting more matches, exponentially decays. So, our researcher Eric, he dug really deep into it, read a lot of papers on how this is designed, and then adapted it to make it work for Fluidity.
Yep, and on that second part of the question about how do I make sure that Fluidity is fair, and how do I make sure that Fluidity is ever evolving in order to bring that transparency and fairness to the user? So Fluidity takes on-chain and off-chain security extremely serious, and as such has implemented several backstops features to be able to prevent these large amount of events in the fraud hacking things to happen, really. So large amount of payouts in the beginning, they are going to be a bit more moderate. However, we're going to be increasing those over time. And when I say large amounts, we're still going to have quite large amounts in the beginning and in the first few weeks of release. However, do expect that prize pool and that reward pool to increase as the protocol matures and becomes more secure over time. However, we are audited, and we can speak a little bit about that later on. And the auditing firms that we have been using have been extremely pleased with the security as well as the code that we've been providing them. In the beginning, we will be using a random.org solution with an adjustment of the UI to build trustworthy randomness into a more centralized version of the product. However, the long-term roadmap has always included the building of a new off-chain system that operates trustlessly without any risk of centralized failure or exploit. So this may include things such as VRF, let's just say. However, this is something that needs to be discussed and further thought about before being really disclosed. But yeah, it's something that we're constantly working on, and it's something that we're super excited to bring in the public. However, in the beginning, do expect that we are still going to be bringing that transparency. It's just going to be through more centralized means.
How are these rewards actually claimed? Is it automatic or is it a manual process?
One of the claims that we really want to upkeep and always have is that rewards or payouts are won instantaneously, and that's something that we are upkeeping. So you are actually able to both claim rewards as soon as they do happen, or just by waiting a couple of blocks, which it's depending on the chain that you are. Solana, the rewards are actual instantaneous. However, for more slower chains, there might be a couple of minutes difference. You will be rewarded instantaneously, automatically. So it's literally a matter of transacting in any on-chain transaction, and a few minutes later you check your wallet and you're like, wow, I have extra money that came out of nowhere, or oh wow, I have 100 FUSDC that appeared out of nowhere just because I transacted in this protocol. So it's quite literally like an airdrop in that instance. So it's rewards are won instantaneously, and they're able to be claimed instantaneously if you haven't been able to see it directly in your wallet.
I wanted to ask about some other use cases. You were talking about DeFi protocols, but also I know, Shamir, you come from a gaming background. Obviously, you have some eyes on the metaverse. How will you guys integrate into different metaverse ecosystems?
I guess as part of any metaverse ecosystem, there is an economy that exists, and economies are very, significant parts of building, a community around any sort of metaverse. And so the idea is that let's assume a game, a game would have a marketplace of sorts, and the goal here is to say, okay, we could turn some of the game currencies into fluid assets, but a lot of games now are also using like stable coins as intermediary tokens between different assets. And so the idea is that when games and communities are swapping between assets, they're swapping to fluid assets and then swapping back into another game item, or just using that as a way to get some sort of stable exposure. and that's how we're thinking about it, because game economies are really interesting. They're very prone to, adopting and adapting to new economic experiments. And our goal and hope is that, if a game were to adopt this, it would be, extremely interesting to see how it would go about it. And the thesis being that, that game would have a very high velocity in its economy of how money moves around. So people are incentivized to be more proactive in spending and buying things. And hopefully this creates a more healthier and more efficient economy within that game. And then the goal is then to start extrapolating that into what this might look like in the real world.
Got it. Okay. Very cool. But like, there's so many different metaverse projects and so many different games and so many different also DeFi projects. How are you guys going to work about getting integrated with them? Do you have a biz dev team that's reaching out, or are people getting in touch with you?
Yeah, we're reaching out to a lot of projects and just educating them and promoting the utility of fluid assets. And we're getting good feedback and reception, so that's always a good thing. People understand that this potentially could work out and could be a very significant thing. And I think eventually over time, as Fluidity starts scaling, it would actually be a massive opportunity cost not to adopt and promote the utility of fluid assets within your protocol. Just a couple of days ago, we actually posted an article about how if Uniswap, if 5% of some of the pairs of Uniswap volume was through fluid assets, because there's a 20%, kickback, I guess, to the receiver of that transaction, Uniswap DAO would actually earn more money than enabling a fee switch. So Uniswap is stuck in this dilemma right now where they want to earn revenue, but they're afraid of leakage because of adding extra fees for LPs. But we ran the numbers, and if just 5% of the volume on the pairs they want to enable fees for, it was through fluid assets, they would actually earn the same amount of money. And so those are the type of things that I guess we really want to push. And I guess once protocols realize that, wait a second, if we just don't, if we don't work with or adopt fluid assets, we're losing out on massive amounts of revenue, then maybe they might be, inclined to be more proactive about it. So that we think that hopefully that counterparty incentive is enough to really start, I guess, that feedback loop where protocols start adopting and competing with each other to try to maximize how much they can earn through it. And this is also healthy for users as well, because now protocols don't have to charge fees to survive. So could be an interesting dynamic.
Yeah,
Is
for
Uniswap
sure.
aware of this?
We posted on their governance blog post, and we certainly made the 1-inch guys aware of it. So we're very happy to keep promoting that message. I also wanted to add on top of what Shamir just said, because it's extremely interesting about protocols not having to charge or to be able to charge less of a fee because of this the average wins that they could potentially expect based upon using fluid assets, is that DApp developers, or when it comes to DeFi and GameFi, they don't necessarily have to charge the fees for it to be used in this case, and their focus is now on increasing the engagement rather than the revenue modeling through high transaction costs or gimmicks that would limit the user experience for the app, for the DApp. So, for example, as users use a DApp and then transact with it through the use of fluid assets, a portion of the prizes that could be won through transacting those assets could go to the dev's wallet or to the game's governance treasury wallet, let's just say. In that instance, the dev is a partial receiver of, say, an item trade or an NFT trade for within that metaverse, where the two parties conducting the trade, they could each earn a certain percentage of that win rather than the 80-20 splits that I focused on earlier on the peer-to-peer transaction. And Fluidity, might earn a certain percentage for whatever, and the developer earns, 20% or however much percent of that transactions winnings, whenever it's performed. So let's just say that there's 10K daily users, you're gaining quite a bit of money, and you aren't charging your users anything extra, and you're able to really focus on the game's fun aspects and the actual core value of the game, rather than, oh man, how can I maximize my profits from the users? It really goes back to basics on how can I increase engagement from users by making the game as fun as possible, or the experience as unique and exciting as possible. So it's really programmable and modular in that way as well.
All right, I know it's a bit early in the project's roadmap, but any names you could drop of maybe some projects or dexes that are on board?
Yeah, sure, for sure. I do have a few names that I can certainly say. So for Solana, we have integrated and are working to make sure that we have support for day one. Things such as Orca, Saber, Soland, Radium, Lifinity, potentially Aldrin. For things such as Ethereum, we have the already mentioned Compound, Uniswap, SushiSwap, Dodo, 1inch, Balancer, Curve potentially on the top of my head, and of course, who could forget Aave with the current grant that we're Aave Grant DAO award winners, and one of the things that we're going to be doing is using Aave as one of the deposit pools in order to generate the rewards for those for the reward pool. So it's yeah, those are some of the names that I could certainly come up with on the top of my head that are certainly coming in the beginning, but the list doesn't stop there. Obviously, with all of the assets, UXD, USDH, et cetera, USDC, the list really keeps on going. It's eventually, when fluid assets are minted and are there and out about in the ecosystem, it's going to be extremely easy for any protocol to be able to actually integrate with us, give or take, since it's just a ERC20 token. So it's going to be very exciting.
Those are all the big names. Seem like things that people would be interested in, myself included.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're certainly focusing on the big ones, as well as some smaller ones, but we aren't shying away from any new experiences as well. Very keen to the potential Tiki Talks, as we call them, which are our podcasts that we hold on our Twitter. We had a really great one with Dopex and Arbitrum recently. So those are some names as well that really big names that I didn't mention right now, but who knows? It could be right around the corner. Jupiter as well was a great Tiki Talk that happened recently. That definitely recommend to watch.
Amazing. Well, now is the pinnacle of the interview when I ask the question that everybody is wanting to ask: Wen Token TM?
Yeah, I mean, that's crypto's favorite pastime question. It's an interesting thing for us. Tokenomics and the token is so valuable in the ecosystem that we're creating, and for us, I guess market conditions being one variable in our decision of when to launch it. What we're really looking for is an indication of like early signs of product market fit. I guess what we're building is something a bit novel, and it might take a little bit of time, for the community and the crypto ecosystem to really start understanding what Fluidity is, how it fits in, and some of the value propositions. And we'll be looking for signs of that early on. And as soon as the protocol starts showing like, okay, this might actually work out, then I think a token is great for bootstrapping and really super accelerating that growth that Fluidity could offer. With that, in terms of token and just what people can get, I guess there's a lot of incentives to just use Fluidity from very early days, because as part of a lot of our algorithms, we actually account for how long you've been using fluid assets, and these are things that could potentially have impacts later down the line, whatever that means. But yeah, I mean, that seems like a very, bad response, but it's actually quite insightful if people really read between the lines or listen between the lines.
Have you decided what the token is going to be called?
We want to call it the Fluid token, but I feel like that might have been taken, or that seems way too, boring. So we're going through a few names, and we'll see whatever works really best for us. We're coming up with new things every day, so who knows?
All right, there is one other token on CoinGecko called Fluid.
Yeah. So we do want a unique name. So
yeah, and we do want to stem away from the flu, right? So let's see what happens.
All right. Well, have you thought about any of the tokenomics of the token? How many there's going to be? What it's going to look like?
yeah, we've just updated our white paper. It should be up in the next day or two. We've really thought about the tokenomics, how emissions work. We researched what other protocols are doing. Initially, our token emissions looked very similar to a bitwise function, like how Bitcoin would have it, or curve, where it would exponentially decay. But now we're actually remodeling it and thinking maybe like an inverse parabola sort of pattern might work better, where I really believe that early people should get exposure to the token because they're taking on more risk. But I also think that there is genuine concern that a lot of times the early people of any protocol, they become very significant, owners of it. And I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing, but I think that's a centralization risk. So I think what Euler has done with their tokenomics has definitely been of inspiration for us for how we are thinking about emissions and just modeling that. But you can read more about some of the rationales and the design choices in our white paper. It's already on the website, but we're updating it just a little bit, and people can read it there. But the TLDR is that we're thinking about the way we distribute tokens to users is that as time progresses, the amount of tokens released increases until there's a peak and then it starts decreasing. So, because we're accounting for the fact that as time progresses, more people use fluid assets. So if we want a wider and fairer distribution, I think we should have maximum emissions when the most amount of people would be using it, and then just start tapering that as the protocol matures, rather than just having massive emissions and then as emissions decay, then people leave. Right. So it's kind of like thinking about it in a completely opposite way, which I think is an interesting way of doing emission modeling.
What are some potential actions you could think of that would be able to gain users some of the fluid or whatever the token will be called?
Very simply, just use fluid assets, and as part of using fluid assets, that supplementary yield that you get sometimes will also be in fluid governance tokens. So there will be people that when they just use fluid assets, they might get $5,000 or $10,000 worth of tokens for making a swap on Uniswap, and it's going to be random. It's going to be varied, and I think that's what's the cool part about it, is that at any given time, you could get a massive amount of exposure to fluid assets by just using it. And I think that's a really cool thing that what we've created. It's like, as fluidity becomes more popular, it's not that your probability of winning or of getting a large exposure goes down. It actually would kind of remain constant. So I guess the cool part is even if you're late to the party, you could still get massive exposure in fluid assets, and that's the unknown. And I think that excites a lot of people, especially in the crypto space, to the point they might just say like, okay, I'll just use fluid assets. Who knows? I might be a massive shareholder one day.
All right. So all the degens.
And on top of that, Fugu, to participating in upcoming protocols that want to gather more attention and really participate in fluidity as it comes around. Do look forward to the governance, because there's a lot of the Fluidity Wars really rewards those that are really in the fluid ecosystem, and could potentially change the user flow and the liquidity of your protocol and the attention that it receives, just because you were able to get higher emissions of certain assets or certain rewards by participating in our ecosystem.
Also, in our opinion, the environment is just right. There is massive saturation right now in the AMM market, and there's protocols that are looking for how do we differentiate ourselves between every other AMM that exists. But there's another pattern or a problem that's happening. Every protocol and their uncle is launching a stable coin. Well, the stable coins are amazing and interesting. what's the difference between using, the up and coming stablecoins and the current stablecoins, right? Of course, every stablecoin has some sort of trade-offs, but if you have 5 stablecoins that offer the same, I guess, guarantees about decentralization and security, it's going to be a very tough, competition for a lot of these stablecoins that are coming out. But Fluidity could potentially be a really interesting mechanic or tool that stablecoins can now utilize to differentiate themselves by rewarding yield to people that use their stablecoins. And this is why we think it's really fascinating, because a lot of times right now, if you're a stablecoin or you're building a stablecoin, the only way you can really get interest in it is by offering some lucrative yield farming program on a money market. That's great, but essentially that doesn't build use cases for a stablecoin, and it goes back to that speculation, right? You're speculating that the stablecoin won't depeg and that the emissions that you're getting you can sell for more money. And so I think that doesn't accomplish much, and a lot of stablecoins in the past have seen that not working out in the best interest. So for us, it's like, okay, we can actually promote the utility of these stablecoins for the very first time, right? Because now people that want to get these rewards have to use these stablecoins, and as they use these stablecoins, they're increasing the demand, obviously, for those stablecoins, but also increasing the use cases, right? Because if I'm trading on NFTs, then I'm pushing my favorite NFT protocol or exchange to actually accept the stablecoin, because I want it part of all my day-to-day activities and things like that. So imagine just using Fluid Go, for example, the Aave stablecoin, and earning supplementary yield in Aave governance tokens. So not only do you get the yield paid in that stablecoin, but you also get Aave tokens. So it's an interesting dynamic, but I guess when people have to select between stablecoins, they might just use the one that has the highest expected outcome for their attention and their utility. And that's a new frontier of competition that I guess Fluid Assets unlock for the very first time.
Got it. Let's talk security. Yvonne wanted to earlier mention something about security, said that we're going to talk about it later. So now is your time. What can you tell us about the situation with the protocol audits and things like that?
Now, what I'll say is that we've been working really hard. Our CTO has been very diligent on making sure that the contracts are written, rewritten, double checked. We have a few names of our auditors that have been helping us, make sure that we're secure and not exploit proof, really. So we have Brahma, we have Verilog, and who else, Shamir? I believe potentially Sherlock in the future.
Yeah, we're also looking at a few more auditors right now as well, Sherlock included. Yeah.
That's right, and these audits are going to be for both the Solana as well as the Ethereum version of the application. And I think things are going well, and hopefully by release we won't be running into any issues. So it's an ongoing progress to make sure that the security of the exploitability of the product are assured to be in a positive situation.
You planning to have any bug bounties?
Sherlock is really cool of a auditor, because once they do audit your protocol, they offer you for a small premium to get a bug bounty paid by them, and also an insurance fund that covers up to $10 million worth of exploits. So, if we do go that route, that's automatically in place for us. So it will exist. And we're leaning towards, going for that forward with them. So they do offer, I think, up to $1 million in bug bounties. So that subsidizes any bug bounties for us.
Very cool. What about any contingency plans? I mean, you can be do as many audits as possible, but you really never know in DeFi like how something can be exploited, no matter how hard you try. Do you have any plans in the event of an emergency?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of security protocols in place, including as far as I'm aware, we do have ability to just freeze the contract to withdraw only, so users can withdraw their funds and no Fluid assets can be minted, etc. And other security parameters in place. Like initially when we do launch Fluidity, there'll be caps on like user deposit limits and total deposit limits. So, there's limited exposure to the exploitability. In terms of how we're thinking about, distributing the funds, when we're smaller, we'll just be using Aave and Compound, but we might start distributing the money as well. So there's, less risk on a single point of failure. But I guess you can always, you can never be too careful. But, we're hoping that, the core DeFi primitives like Aave and Compound don't get exploited. But if they do, I think, there's a lot more other concerns for the crypto space than fluid assets. But, that does not, excuse us from any, proactive security measures as well.
What is planned for the next 6 months to 1 year? What can we expect?
I can kick us off a little bit with what you can expect for the next 6 months. So we're going to be obviously starting working with more protocols, lots of more integrations from here until the end of the year. So like obviously that's a little bit less than 6 months, but from here until the end of the year, expect a lot more integrations. From here until the end of the year into the 6 months mark, expect a lot more chain integrations. Expect more EVM chains finalized, potentially some layer 2 integrations finalized, and even some cross-chain things, question mark, depending on seeing how everything goes and the conversations that we're currently having internally right now. Towards the 6 months to the 1 year mark, or even a little bit before the 6 months, we plan on having a few utility mining programs running. Particularly one of the ones that we can speak about right now is with Dodo. So the Dodo exchange, it's certainly something that we are looking forward to in building the relationship to have the utility mining program. But from here to 6 months into the 12-month mark, we do planning a lot, running a lot more of these, a lot more in a decentralized fashion, and that we can be a little bit less involved, and it can be part of the protocol to start running these things. Obviously, from here until the 1 year mark, we do plan on having governance, and with governance comes the potential, the elusive fluid token or the Flu token, or whatever the ticker ends up being, and things like potential like a utility gauges and things that will determine how the Fluidity Wars is run. So there's a lot more to discuss about, but these are some really exciting things that we can certainly expect from here to 6 months, and from 6 months to the 12 months mark. Now, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about, Shamir?
No, I think that's a really good snapshot of what's to come. Obviously, in crypto, things move very fast. So, we're also victims of our circumstances, in the sense that, if fluid assets really take off, then who knows where else you could be using them and what exotic use cases people develop to try to use fluid assets on. So we're really excited in seeing how the community thinks about adopting and using fluid assets.
As someone interested in using it, is there any rough dates you can give me of when I can get my hands on at least the testnet or something?
Well, testnet has been live for the last couple of months. You can try it out on both Solana and Ethereum on Ropsten. And maybe Yvonne could tell you a bit more about mainnet.
That's right. So we've been around with the testnet for Ropsten and the DevNet on Solana for quite a while now, and we actually had a really successful experience and a very supportive community. So it's been a pleasure seeing that evolve, and us capturing that much of volume and essentially getting a Compound to really fork out a lot of their USDC and USDT. When it comes to the mainnet, you can certainly expect something by September. Sometime in September is the current aim for the bullseye for us to get our new web app, our new website, as well as a brand new look to Fluidity, and how we would like to present our branding as well as our mission to everyone with regards to the incentive layer, which is what we're calling this entire endeavor with Fluidity, incentivizing the use case of crypto assets as well as on-chain assets and migrating potential Web 2 attention into Web 3. So yeah, it's going to be a very very rushed, very stressful few weeks ahead of us, but it's going to be also extremely exciting weeks ahead of us, and you can certainly expect a lot of events, a lot of conversation, a lot of talks coming out of Shamir, as well as myself and our team. Yeah, very, very soon. So September is the month.
Amazing. So you got about a month to get this done. You guys must be working hard.
Oh yeah. Right now, as we speak, I am currently in a marathon house that we rented out, and myself, CTO, the devs, we essentially are spending every single day of the week, locking ourselves up. We're cooking food together over here, myself and the CTO, and we're encouraging the devs to really pump out a lot of the code, but obviously looking after their health. So not locking up the key. Certainly, just encouraging them to come here, chat around, especially in this work from home ecosystem and decentralized ecosystem. It really means a lot for us to be able to see each other and interact. I've been having certainly a really great week together with the guys over here at the house.
Amazing. I guess make sure to eat your vegetables along with your ramen noodles.
That's it. But yeah, no, it's we're certainly looking forward to it, and we do hope that the elusive September date comes, and we're able to fondly look back at the hard work and where we're able to stand right now. One of the things that I will say is that we're going to be showing a few sneak peeks and a few blog posts, as well as a roadmap blog post in the next coming weeks, in the next couple of weeks rather. And I will be in Bali in CoinFest Asia, and I'll be speaking a little bit about Fluidity there, together with our chief legal officer, or head of legal, Ida Mock. And Shamir is going to be hosting a very nice presentation, a potential keynote, I believe, in the Crypto Week Australia, which is going to be happening in Brisbane sometime in September, I believe the 15th of September or so. And there's a lot more events that's going to be happening. Solana Breakpoint. There's going to be the Philippines Blockchain Week, potentially ETH Ho Chi Minh. We're certainly trying to make our mark and really contribute to the community in the next couple of months.
Now, there are some who claim that we're in a bear market at the moment. Some who claim that we're in a super cycle. But do you guys have any concerns about launching during these times when there's kind of a bearish sentiment, or do you think it's the perfect time to launch because you don't have the noise like you do in the bull?
I think, there's both sides to that argument. But our opinion is that, if, we can wait forever and try to time the market and, and launch, but, you can never time it, and I guess it's worth saying that some of the most prominent protocols that, that are leading the space today were launched during bear markets. So I guess it really comes to that. And I think like launching in a bear market helps you set more realistic expectations of growth and, adoption, and just, like growing, and then feedback as well. So, it's not as chaotic, less noise, and it really helps us build a very strong foundation to the time where, when the bull market or the market is hot again, Fluidity is right there in its prime to really grow and super scale, because we do have the foundation set up. I think the biggest risk for us would be, launching in like a very hyped market and then growing so quickly and then just busting, because of like all the attention, and then that's kind of like a death sentence for a lot of protocols. But sometimes even in bear markets, if things don't go perfectly, it gives you time to build and reconsider your choices and go back to the drawing board, because it's not as chaotic. So that's our rationale towards it. I think the realistic growth and just the ability to start set foundations is really important to us. And I think it's worth mentioning, a precursor to every bull market has been the invention of a new token distribution method. So prior to the DeFi bull run, liquidity mining was just, being tested and really expanded. And then in this time, we had like the idea of like X to earn, walk to earn, do this to earn, that had, really accelerated the growth. So who knows, maybe Fluidity might set precedents for the next up run, fingers crossed.
I'm definitely interested personally, but if any of the listeners are interested in keeping up with the project or getting involved, what kind of call to action do you have? How can they get more into it? What can they do?
Alrighty, so there are a few things, and I'm pretty proud of the team and what we've been able to build so far. We've written this really nice documentation that everyone's really able to start getting a bit of a taste about Fluidity. We try to be as verbose, but also as concise and well spoken as possible. So that's just docs.fluidity.money. Alternatively, we actually have a myriad of Tiki Talks that we're going to be continuing until the years to come, really, where we host ourselves together with either a partnering protocol or just a protocol that we're really interested in this space or might be up and coming. And we speak about Fluidity, we speak about that protocol, we speak about the space of DeFi, sometimes some jokes around, and really about the synergies about those protocols. And a lot of the times we really learn a lot there. There's a few times where I'm just listening to that and I learn things from Shamir, I learn things from our host, which is Yoel, and I'll also learn things from the extremely talented people that we invite into this the podcasts. Apart from that, we also love to write these extremely informative blog posts. A few of them are research-based blog posts. Right now, we just released the one on ZK snarks and just zero knowledge proofs. But we have this running series that we call Fluidity University, where we explore fluidity and its extremely exciting concepts. We had a 4-part series where we explain things from what is fluidity to what are fluidity's mechanisms to fluidity governance and Fluidity Wars. And if you are, if you even have the slightest interest in Fluidity, I definitely recommend reading them. They're very beginner friendly, but also they really are well written and extremely interesting to read. We also try to get involved in the community as much as possible with our recent blog posts on the Uniswap fee switch case and introducing Fluidity as a concept, and even on Aave and explaining a little bit about the Go coin proposal that happened and how potentially that could play out with Fluidity. So definitely a lot of material that people can read on. And alternatively, please just come on Discord, come on our Telegram, or even on our website, fluidity.money, or our linktree/fluiditymoney. Check out our socials and please get involved. We don't bite. We're more than happy to always answer questions. Much like we say in our Tiki Talk, if you ever have any burning questions, raise your hand, reach out to myself, Shamir, or anyone involved in the chat, and we're going to be more than happy to get you involved and get you into the Fluid ecosystem.
Sounds good. Looking forward to following your journey and also seeing what you guys come out with in a month from now, and also in the roadmap over the next 6 months to 1 year. So thanks for the chat, guys. I really had a good time and learned a lot. So thank you.
Thanks for having us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Fugu. Yeah, it's been a lovely chat, and really looking forward to seeing you interacting with all those protocols and with the Fluid assets. It's going to be an amazing, incredible ride.